What TCU is doing in the transfer portal right now at the running back position tells you that they're okay with the guys they have on campus. And I'm fine with that too. I'll tell you why here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. So it's transfer portal season, and one of the most discussed position groups on this TCU team for the last year plus has been the running back position. They have entertained a UTSA running back on campus, Kevorian Barnes, who has kind of an interesting backstory. Had some really productive seasons as a sophomore, ran for 851 yards on 136 carries. As a junior, ran for 715 yards on 147 carries. But in this past year, 78 carries, 221 yards, about 3 yards per carry, only 2 touchdowns. And it wasn't like he dealt with injuries that kept him out of the ballgame. Now, I did reach out to somebody who covers UTSA. I'm going to share in a minute what he told me about Kevorian and just where he was health-wise and what he meant to the UTSA team over the last couple of seasons. But it wasn't like he was not available for the games. He was getting carries. He was getting a workload. It just wasn't super productive. He wasn't running the ball effectively. So it's an interesting offer. It's an interesting situation with them having him on campus for a visit. And I think it tells you about what they believe in as far as where their running back room is right now. You got Cam Cook coming back, who ended up leading the team with rushing with only 460 yards. You got Jeremy Payne coming back, who showed some really good things in spurts. Just his playing time wasn't always super consistent. Trent Battle, not sure if he's going to move on or if he'll be back, but I think we know who Trent is at this point. He's a solid player. He's good in pass protection. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He can tote the rock from time to time. It feels like at this point of his career, though, he's kind of who he is. And I remember before last season started, Sonny Dykes went on Sick'em 365 Radio, or 365 Sports, I think is what they call it now. And he was asked about the running back room specifically, and he was like, well, look, going into spring practice, we weren't sure about it, but coming out of spring practice, we actually felt really good about where we were at. Cam Cook stepped up in a big way. They felt good about Trey Sanders, who sort of faded in the background and became a forgotten part of this team, weirdly. But he said Trey Sanders was as healthy as he's ever been. Trey finished the season. Let me pull up his stats here. 13 carries for 46 yards. They brought in Dominic Johnson, who is also in the transfer portal now. That's some news in the running back room. I honestly didn't even realize he had eligibility left, but he announced on Twitter today that he's entering the transfer portal. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. So Dominic Johnson going to try to play for another team. He had 18 carries for 63 yards. The vision for him was that he could be a short yardage back, kind of a bully ball type of player, and that didn't really happen. They would use him in some heavy packages like a fullback, but not getting much run at the running back position. So anyway, going into this year, they felt pretty confident. And a few of you accused me of missing the mark with my Cam Cook evaluation, but one thing that did stand out to me during spring was that players were going out of their way. His teammates were going out of their way to be like, oh, yeah, this guy's a dude. He's going to play super well. He did not get off to a great start. And then his playing time sort of got cut into because Jeremy Payne emerged. Trent Battle had a good game against Utah. And so he was sort of the dude for a minute. And they kind of had this musical chairs going on. Then, of course, Savion Williams takes over as the player who finishes second in rushing yards. And if he would have been in this Wildcat situation for the entire season, I think he would have led the team in rushing yards. So you just had this mixing and matching kind of based on the week-to-week performance. I did feel like Cam showed some encouraging signs towards the end of the season. Did some nice things against Oklahoma State. Did some nice things against Arizona. The Cincinnati game, sort of a wash. But he showed some flashes where you saw the vision and the speed and the elusiveness that we thought he could bring to the table as a four-star recruit. But overall, it was very inconsistent, and they have to get better in the run game. And it feels like what they're doing right now and the type of players that they're looking at, they're betting on this group they have right now getting better this offseason and being prepared to step into a bigger role this upcoming year. And maybe it's not one guy. Maybe it's more running back by committee. Maybe it's a mix of Cam Cook doing some good things, Jeremy Payne doing some good things. Nate Palmer is also a guy that's on campus, didn't see playing time this year, but he's a young player that came in with a good amount of hype as a recruit, and so he could be an option. I think they believe in this running back room. Now, they made the same evaluation last year, and I feel like overall you could say it was a mistake. But that's the vibe I'm getting by the type of signals they're putting out in the transfer portal right now. As far as Kevorian Barnes goes, I reached out to Javi Cardenas, who covers UTSA for the Rivals Network. And I said, hey, Javi, can you just give me some insight on who this guy is as a player and why his production dipped last year, what the big drop-off can be attributed to? And here's what he said. Fantastic human, just all around a great kid to be around. We all really thought he was going to be the next Sincere McCormick, which was a super successful running back at UTSA. He dealt with injuries in 2023 that seemed to linger into 2024. He seemed to have gotten buried in the depth chart after some lackluster performances, especially after the younger running backs started to come on. I think he just needs to get healthy and get some fresh scenery. So I appreciate Javi giving me that lengthy answer. Sounds like Barnes dealt with injuries in 2023. They didn't keep him out of the lineup in 2024, but they sort of lingered and affected his explosiveness and his ability. And so because of that, he was struggling. They went to some younger running backs who were doing some nice things, and then he got buried on the depth chart. That's why he hit the portal. So that's all well and good. It makes sense as to what happened this past season. It feels like TCU's betting on, okay, this is a guy that's shown some promise in the past. He's well respected by his teammates. He's well liked in the locker room. So it's a low risk take, as in he's not going to cause problems within the program. It's just a matter of how healthy is he, how explosive is he, what does he look like when we get him on the field, and if he becomes a good depth piece, then that's a positive for this team. I think if they end up taking him here and he signs, it's more, okay, could we get 5 to 10 carries at most out of him a game? And he's not, I mean, Dominic Johnson was a big running back, and it was very clear from the when he got here what they envisioned him doing. Barnes is 210 pounds, but he's also 5'9". So it's not like he's just this huge bruiser, but he does give you a little extra beef in a running back room right now that has more kind of slight guys. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but just they're a little more thin in their frame than you typically see from like a short yardage back. I think Barnes is going to end up here. That's just my assumption and my guess. Putting some things together. Dominic Johnson entering the portal today, his visit happening over the weekend. I haven't seen if there's a lot of other schools that are interested. It feels like TCU is made an evaluation here, and they're trusting that evaluation and saying, we think this guy can be effective for us. He can be potentially a depth piece and can give us some more stability in that running back room. But ultimately, we're banking on our young guys to carry the load. And this is the dilemma really across the country in college sports. And I talked about a little bit about it last week, but it's the give and take of like, okay, we've recruited players to play from the high school ranks, and they don't have a lot of experience. At some point, they have to come in and make plays without having much of a track record. So do you bank on your player development and guys stepping into that role, or are you constantly playing this game of we have to go portal, we have to find somebody who can step in right away, bridge the gap until these people are ready? The reality of it is, as a coaching staff, you have to constantly be evaluating these things, and you kind of have to take a risk and bet on it. It feels like that's what they're doing in the offensive line. Now, at the tackle position, if I were them, I would be more aggressive at getting a veteran offensive lineman, and I'd be willing to spend money there. Just because I'm not sure Ryan Hughes and Ben Taylor Whitfield are totally ready to be everyday starters. at the running back spot, even though it was very rocky this past year, and I think we can all agree they did not run the ball well, I'm okay with them betting on, hey, let's see if just some time, some maturity, more time in the weight room, getting more reps on the field, getting more live reps, and just sort of understanding and this all coming together and clicking for them is the recipe for a better and more productive run game in 2025. And I feel like Barnes is a good fit in that, hey, you can come in and compete. I mean, it's an open job. But if you're not our starter, there's still a place where you can be a change of pace back, give somebody a spell here and there, and also add that leadership that we want, that veteran presence that you need to hold everybody accountable throughout the course of the season. Now, one offer that could throw a wrench in this and is intriguing based on all the things that I just said, Terrion Stewart, running back out of Bowling Green. He is also in the portal, and TCU officially offered him. Had a really good season last year, 890 yards, about 6 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. Went for $150 against Western Michigan on 15 carries, 117 against Central Michigan, 124 against Kent State, 161 against Fordham, 99 yards against Toledo. Consistent all year long. And Stewart showed some explosiveness. He's a guy that is wanting to go somewhere where he's going to be the lead back. I don't think there's any question about it based on what he did the year before. Now, Terrion's getting offered by a lot of different schools. Arkansas, Texas Tech, Houston, South Florida, Kentucky, Memphis. The list goes on. USC, Kansas. So there's a lot of schools involved that are trying to get his services, and it's a much more competitive situation. TCU, to my knowledge, has not gotten him on campus for a visit yet, and I think there will be more opportunities elsewhere for him, so I wouldn't bet on it happening, but it did catch my eye when they offered him because, like I said, I think overall they're banking on, hey, we can improve and get better with our current players and be in a better situation next year. But at the same time, you always have to keep your options open. And when somebody like this is available, it doesn't hurt to say, hey, we're around, right? Maybe we're not your first priority right now, but we're here. We see what you're doing. We'd love to have you here if it came down to it. That's a lead back, though. That's a guy that's going to come in and compete for a starting job right away. I think Barnes is more somebody who can be available if you need him and give you a different look at times. They need to get better in the run game. They have to get more consistent. And maybe it's just by committee. Maybe it's not with Cam Cook being a dude that gets 20 carries a game. Maybe it's Cam getting 12, Jeremy Payne getting 7 or 8, Barnes getting a couple, Nate Palmer getting involved. That's fine. You just have to find a way to run the ball well. And then another aspect of this, Haas Haney, whose rushing numbers weren't eye-popping this past year, but we know in that Cincinnati game, when push came to shove and it was like, hey, we have to sustain a drive here and milk this clock. What did they do? They ran Haas Haney out there. And they said, let's get the quarterback power going. So he could become the new Savion, but you don't want to live with your Wildcat package being your run game. You can do some cool things with it. It can really tip the numbers in your favor from a run game perspective. That can't be the centerpiece of what you're trying to do on the ground, though. So Kevorian Barnes, I think he ends up at TCU. And then Terrion Stewart from Bowling Green, another name to watch and just see what happens over the next few weeks as TCU continues to try to add players in the transfer portal. They did get that commitment on Sunday from Ansel Denbu, the defensive lineman who plays high school ball at Aledo. but spent the last few seasons at Washington State. When we come back, TCU basketball. The men, they got a victory over South Alabama on Monday. We'll talk about that here on Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. The college football playoff is almost here. Games start Friday night, and TNT will have coverage for you. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff, presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, SMU battling Penn State. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset Texas in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. So TCU basketball, they were back in action on Monday after a pretty lengthy time off, and they defeated South Alabama by the score of 58-49. So not exactly an offensive explosion out there on Monday night. If you missed the news from the weekend, Frankie Collins, TCU's point guard, led the team in points, steals, and assists per game, and was really just unquestionably the best player through the first month of the season, best scorer. He's out for the year. Stress fracture in his foot. He suffered that in the Vandy game at Dickies Arena a couple Sundays ago. So he had surgery and he's going to be done for the year. Brendan Wenzel, the transfer from Wyoming, also was out with an ankle injury tonight. Not sure the timetable on that, but he was not available. So those are two of your best ball handlers. And Vashawn Allett got the lion's share of that duty tonight. Pretty thin bench. They sort of survived through the first 10 minutes of this game where South Alabama had a lead for the majority of it and then were able to turn it up, especially on the defensive end of the floor in the second half. That was my big positive tonight. The effort on defense looked better. They played well. South Alabama ran kind of an interesting – they would press in the full court or in the back court and force TCU to pass the ball around and get, past the timeline. And then once they got in the half court, they'd go into the zone look. And it gave TCU a lot of fits through the first 10 minutes of the ball game, had some turnovers. But overall, they finished with 12 turnovers, so not a horrible night in that regard. A really rough night shooting the basketball. 38% as a team from the field, 19% from three, 5 of 26. But defensively, they only gave up 33% shooting, 26% from three. They also out-rebounded South Alabama 40-30, and they were even in the turnover margin. So didn't lose any ground there. They're just going to struggle to score without Frankie out there. I mean, Vashawn Allett asserted himself at times, and he ended up leading the team in scoring with 14 points. Trezarian White had 13 points. Wasn't super efficient, though. Was 5 of 14 from the field. Ernest Uday had a good night scoring the basketball. But, again, with Ernest, it's all going to be rim running, lob plays, dunks. So you set that up with dribble penetration, and the guards did that at times. The key for me with this group right now, I want to see as much of Micah Robinson as possible, the true freshman, who didn't have a great night shooting the basketball, but I like what he can bring to the table. David Punch is awesome, man. He's not going to score like 20 points, but he's a good rebounder. He hustles out there. He plays good defense. He protects the rim. He does all the little things that you want to see, and it feels like the sky's the limit for him as far as he's just kind of scratching the surface of the type of player that he can be moving forward. I want to see these young guys play. Now, I believe Jamie's going to let this play out and see, okay, how do we do? We suffered a big loss, but let's give ourselves some time to adjust, get to a new normal, and at least through the first part of conference play, see what it looks like with this new team on the field. That being said, I mean, I think you got to look more towards, okay, how do we protect our future, make sure that these young guys that we like feel engaged, feel like they're part of the culture here, and have some loyalty, have some stock in this, so they're not just looking immediately to bail and go elsewhere. I think that's the big goal for the rest of the season. You survived tonight, played good enough defense to get a victory, and you're just going to have to search through the year, especially in Big 12 play, for ways to score points and to stay competitive and to be in these ball games. But they survived tonight after a big change, and we'll see how long Wenzel's out. I mean, that's a big loss. He can shoot the three a little bit. He brings them some versatility in the half court. They need him on the floor. I would love to see dudes like Punch and Robinson, though, get a ton of minutes. And even I think you consider, like, so we pull it in a red shirt off Ashton Simmons. We pull a red shirt off RJ Jones and just give these guys a chance. Because at this point, I mean, what do you have to lose? You know, you've had sort of low expectations anyway. That's blown up even more in your face with some of these injuries. I think you have to consider it if you're Jamie Dixon. But the Frogs get a win 58-49 over South Alabama on Monday night. We'll get some of your thoughts on the show next here on Lockdown Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. You can bet on live NFL games each and every week at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app. They make it really easy for you. You win one $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. Again, you hit on one $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com, or if you use the FanDuel app, NFL, NBA, college football, college hoops, NHL in full swing. It's a great time to be a sports fan. It's a great time to join FanDuel. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. FanDuel is where the game starts. Also want to tell you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the fun way to get involved in the daily fantasy world. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with PrizePicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. It's the best place to jump in on the real money action. Join now because this holiday season, PrizePicks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas. And this is simple over-under on stat totals. This is not picking winners. This is you zero in on some players. Do you think they're going to go over-under on different stat totals? Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 instantly when you play with $5. So you put $5 down and get $50 instantly if you use that promo code LOCKEDONCollege. PrizePicks. It's the fun way to play fantasy sports. A couple of days ago, Big Easy chimed in on the show in the YouTube comments, and he said, look, TCU needs to focus on catching SMU right now. And he saw this coming, and I sort of blew him off and other people when they mentioned this. But, yeah, it's true. I got egg in my face when it comes to SMU. I really thought it would take time. I didn't doubt that they could eventually build a winner. But I felt like making that jump to the ACC was going to be a big hurdle. And they're going to be playing in the playoff, as I said in that read earlier on TNT. Unfortunately, they'll be matching up with Penn State, and TCU has to kind of get their swagger back in the DFW Metroplex for sure. Jacob Langford says, D-line could use some help. We lost a battle in the trenches on many games. Glad we didn't play Arizona State and Scatterboo this year. Yep, and that's where you're at in Ansel Dinboo. I think the depth on the D-line just wasn't there. I do feel good about Marcus Deal. I like what he can do. I like what Ansel can do when he gets on campus. And they get some other young guys in the interior that can do some good things. But you're right. They have to get better up front on both sides of the ball defensively. I mean, they lost that Baylor game because they just could not block. David said, should TCU be interested in Eugene Brooks? We need more bulk in the interior of the offensive line. You know, I think they're actually pretty good on the interior offensive line. I feel solid about that. Now, I think at the tackle position, there's trouble. But Eugene Brooks is an offensive lineman at Oklahoma. I mean, I'm all for adding more hog mollies. I don't know if he's a top priority for them. But I think with Cade Bennett coming back, that's a huge addition. And I feel like quietly, I mean, James Brockermeyer, Colton Deary, Carson Bruno at times, Remington Strickland, they did some good things towards the end of the season. And so you add a healthy Cade Bennett to that mix and allow him to go to work. That could be a good working interior line. And Frog Fan asked me about this yesterday, and I hadn't heard about it, but I did see some chatter about it on social media today. So maybe I'll do a segment later in the week. There is some talk about Quinn Ewers in North Carolina. Now, Arch Manning potentially taking over that starting job and Quinn kind of exiting stage left. What does he do next? I don't know. But, man, that would really set a scene and add even more hype to a potential season opener between North Carolina and TCU with Bill Belichick at the helm. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.